We absolutely support Israel's right to defend itself in line with international law.
We need to safeguard financial stability.
2024 is not going to be an easy year.
We used to call it the dream of home ownership, but look at Britain now.
We've got to hang on to optimism and hope because it is the biggest driver of change.
Let's stop thinking of life in terms of Brexit. Let's move on and look to the future.
You're listening to Bloomberg UK Politics. I'm Yuan Potts.
And I'm Caroline Hepker. Welcome to the programme.
So Rishi Sunak fended off the rebels and won the Commons vote on his Rwanda bill. We're going to bring you Prime Minister's questions shortly. But the rebellion in the end, well, it was something of a damp squib, wasn't it? No votes against and not enough abstentions to bring down the bill. But the whole issue is far from resolved. The European Research Group, the faction on the right, which has been given something of a new lease of life, well, they've reserved the right to change the legislation next month. And that, of course, would upset moderates on the other side of the party.
Yeah, the internecine war within the Conservative Party just continues. The Rwanda policy in and of itself, if you want to think about that, remains expensive, ineffective and basically legally dubious. But is this really about policy? I mean, I would argue that it could also simply highlight Rishi Sunak's lack of political skill, as well as the sort of Tories' internal blood feud between the centrists and the right-wingers, even as the British economy struggles.
Yeah, talking in which, after months of a run of months when most GDP data came in better than expected, a little bit better than expected, we got some pretty ropey numbers this morning. That's a technical economic term. The UK economy shrank more than expected in October, with gross domestic product dropping by 0.3%. It was one of the wettest Octobers on record, and we have discussed how weather tends to affect these numbers a little bit.
I can't believe you're pulling out the weather argument. Yes,
Do I sound like an apologist?
Well, no, but it's the one that everyone cites, retail sales and so on. I mean, if you're really depending on, whether the weather is a little bit difficult.
Well,
I mean, yes, it was the wettest since...
It was one. I think it was the joint wettest on record or something. Yeah,
1866 or something like that.
As it does underline the kind of fragility of the economy if a bit of rain sort of really dents the GDP numbers. But yeah, it does. I think that probably does affect consumer spending. People staying in and listening to their favourite podcast. And of course, remember that the PM made growing the economy one of his 5 key pledges, along with stopping the boats. We know he's met the inflation one, but this one is looking pretty dodgy, isn't it, as we head towards the end of the year?
Yeah, look, we know that the UK is stagnating. I mean, and partly this is driven, of course, by the rapid increase in interest rates in the UK. In order to bring down those record high inflation numbers. The danger is that instead of stagnation, recession perhaps remains ever present for the UK. So this, I think, is going to be problematic. I wonder how much, though, of all of this is going to come up in PMQs. We often do get a Keir Starmer curveball at Prime Minister's questions. So here's my betting for what that could be. If I were writing some of the briefing notes, this new report on baby milk prices. Do you know how much they've gone up by?
How much?
25% over 2 years.
Gosh.
So, and I did not
way
realise
ahead of general inflation.
It is, and much higher even than overall food price inflation, which has been in double digits. The British Pregnancy Advisory Service is focused on this. They did a survey out today talking about the devastating impact on family budgets. So as people really do come to the end of the political year, this is the last PMQs of the year, and we think about Christmas time, families with young children will be thinking about this.
Yeah, so immigration and the economy, I guess you've got to be your top 2 bets. But yeah, interesting to see if there is a curveball. As you say, the Bank of England has been hiking interest rates, and it looks like that's been quite effective in bringing down inflation. Although here's Keir Starmer. Let's listen in.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday we heard of the tragic death of a young man on the Bibby Stockholm. I know the whole House will want to send our deepest condolences to his family and friends. We must never let this happen again. I would also like to mark the retirement of my colleague and friend, Mark Drakeford, the First Minister of Wales. Mark committed his life to public service and lives his values every day. Quietly and patiently, Mark has been a titan of Labour and Welsh politics, and we thank him for his service and wish him well. Mr. Speaker, Christmas is a time of peace on earth and goodwill to all. Has anyone told the Tory party?
Mr. Speaker, Christmas is also a time for families, and under the Conservatives we do have a record number of them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to this point, at the beginning of the year I set out some priorities that this government would deliver for the British people, and over the course of this year we have, Mr. Speaker. Inflation halved, Mr. Speaker, the economy growing, debt falling, action on the longest waiters, the boats down by a third, and crucially, as we heard from Honourable Friend, tax cuts coming to help working families in the new year.
Mr. Speaker, he can spin it all he likes, but the whole country can see that yet again the Tory party is in meltdown and everyone else is paying the price. Now, he's kicked the can down the road, but in the last week his MPs have said of him he's not capable enough, he's inexperienced, he's arrogant, a really bad politician. When they're shouting, this is what they said. So, well, come on. Who was it who said he's a really bad politician? Hands up. They're shouting. Well, what about inexperienced? Who was that? Or, and now there's got to be some hands for this, he's got to go. Oh, shy. Apparently, he's holding a Christmas party next week.
Order. It's Christmas. No, but you might not want the Christmas present that I could give you. So please, Keir Starmer.
Apparently he's holding a Christmas party next week. How's the invite list looking?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman for all the comments. What I would say to him, he should hear what they have to say about him, Mr. Speaker.
Right. Do you want to be the first one? Because it is Christmas and I'm going to hear it. My constituents are going to have a Christmas like everyone else. They want to know how their Christmas is going to be affected. So I want less of it from all sides. Keir Starmer.
They've obviously found the donkey for their nativity. The search of three wise men may take a little longer. But while they fight amongst themselves, there's a country out here that isn't being governed, where more than 100,000 people are paying hundreds more a month on their mortgages. Energy bills going back up in January. The economy shrinking again. NHS waiting lists an all-time high. Doesn't he think the government would be better off fixing the messes they've already made rather than scrambling to create new ones?
Mr. Speaker, he talks about governing and spent the first two questions talking about political tittle-tattle, Mr. Speaker. What a joke. Well, let's get on to the substance, Mr. Speaker. Let's get on to the substance. He mentioned the things. What is the news that we've just heard in the last week? Well, what's the most important thing? The most important thing is education, Mr. Speaker, because that's how we spread opportunity in our country. And what have we learned? Where are the schools performing best in the United Kingdom? In England, Mr. Speaker, thanks to the reforms of this Conservative government, rising up the league tables, giving our kids the start they need. And where are they plummeting down? In Labour-run Wales.
He talks about children. Nearly 140,000 children are going to be homeless this Christmas. That is more than ever before. That's a shocking state of affairs, and it should shame this government. Instead of more social housing, house building is set to collapse. Instead of banning no-fault evictions, thousands of families are at risk of homelessness. Rather than indulging his backbenchers swanning around in their factions and their star chambers, pretending to be members of the mafia, when's he going to get a grip and focus on the country?
Let's just look at the facts. Let's look at the facts, actually, because rough sleeping in this country is down by 35%, Mr. Speaker, since its peak, thanks to the efforts of this government. There are hundreds of thousands of fewer children in poverty today, thanks to this government, Mr. Speaker. And when it comes to home building, again, what is he doing? We just had the data this last week. in the last year. An almost record number of new homes delivered, Mr. Speaker. More than in any year of the last Labour government.
140,000 children homeless this Christmas, and he's utterly tone deaf. And the rise in homelessness shows how these Tory crises merge and grow and damage the country. Families like the Bradys in Wiltshire, both parents working full-time with 2 young children, forced out of their home of 15 years by a no-fault eviction, now living in their van. Or 11-year-old Liam Walker, homeless this Christmas. He wrote a letter to Santa saying, "Please, can I have a forever home? I don't want any new toys. I just want all my old toys out of storage. I just want us to be happy again." Is there anything that could shame this government into putting the country first? Then it's surely this little boy.
Mr. Speaker, if he really cared about building homes... No. If he really cared about building homes, when there was an opportunity in this House, Mr. Speaker, in this House, to back our plans to reform defective EU laws, to unlock 100,000 new homes, Mr. Speaker, what did he do? What did he do? He went in front of the cameras and said one thing and came in here and blocked it. Typical shameless opportunism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. He hasn't finished. As the world's...
Mr. Speaker, is that really his Christmas message to Liam? Cocooned in his party management breakfast. He just can't see the...
Order. Mr. Cleverly, please. It's Christmas. I want a little bit of silence. And I'm going to get it one way or another. And that goes to each side. Keir Starmer.
Cocooned in his party management breakfast. He just can't see the country in front of him and what they've done. I'll finish by thanking hard-working families across Britain who kept our country going. It's been an impossibly difficult year for so many. I want to pay special tribute to our key workers, particularly those in the emergency services and those serving abroad in our forces, who, even at this time of year, are doing the vital work of protecting their country. I wish everyone, including the members opposite, a very happy and peaceful New Year. Will the Prime Minister join me?
Prime Minister.
I think, Mr. Speaker, he missed that I paid tribute to our emergency workers at the beginning of the session, Mr. Speaker. But let's see. No, because I think it is important, because he talked about working families. Of course, Mr. Speaker, I want to make sure that we support working families, and that's what we're actually delivering, Mr. Speaker, because all he has to offer them is borrowing £28 billion a year, which all it will do is push up their mortgage rates and push up their taxes. Meanwhile, what have we done? Delivered tax cuts for millions of working families, boosted the national living wage, Mr. Speaker, recruited 50,000 more nurses, 20,000 more police officers, improved our schools. We've cut the cost of net zero for those working families. We've cut the boat crossings by a third and we've halved inflation. And that's the difference, Mr. Speaker. We're getting on and delivering for working Britain.
So that was the Prime Minister then, ending Prime Minister's questions. Much merrymaking is how I will put that Prime Minister's questions session down. Bit chaotic. A couple of Dickensian portraits, depictions, I would say, from the opposition leader about, the number of children who will be homeless in the UK, the level of poverty in Britain. I mean, that is
140,000.
A very, very grim statistic. The Prime Minister trying to stick to facts and talking about how his party, he says, is delivering, and actually all the Labour Party would be offering is £28 billion per year in borrowing. But I think quite a difference in tone. It was quite a big picture, end of year sort of piece, I would say, by the opposition leader.
It did feel a little bit panto, didn't it? Albeit like a sort of adult panto with some quite grim moments in it. Keir Starmer had again a lot of pre-planned gags and some quite clever lines, I thought. I'm slightly obsessed that he's got a new joke writer.
Yes, he does, I'm sure.
This is the third or the fourth week where he's had a lot of punchy lines and delivering them quite well as well. Something interesting I noticed from the beginning, where the Prime Minister was answering a question, and he didn't talk about his pledges, but his priorities. Now, it may have been a slip, but I just wondered if he's slightly rebranding the 5 pledges as 5
I like that you
priorities.
have picked. This is the sort of nitty-gritty that must not fly under the radar. No, I think that is very interesting. And the jokes were, pretty good, I think. How's the party invite list going for Rishi Sunak? And, we have the donkey, but looking for the three wise men. Yes, little bit of panto. But on the other hand, one needs performance also in order to get the message across. And actually, in the last few weeks, it does seem that Keir Starmer is managing to bring that very performative element that you need at the dispatch box, in an interesting way. And the Prime Minister has struggled a little bit with that to come up with a riposte.
Yeah, and it's interesting how Starmer rather effectively deployed the case of the little boy made homeless after his parents were evicted. I thought that was quite poignant. It's something that Jeremy Corbyn used to try to do and didn't always really hit the spot.
Well, the line that caught my attention was how the problems that Keir Starmer blamed on the government are, merge and grow was the line. Merge and grow, i.e., once you're evicted and then that causes knock-on effects. I thought maybe that is a line that might ring true. If you are in the middle of a cost of living crisis, that could be seen as true.
And Starmer raising that issue of homelessness, he says that there's a record number of people without a home, but Sunak responding that rough sleeping is down by a third. And of course, both those things can be true at the same time because they are two different things. I think really interesting to think over the course of this year how the two men have changed in their general approval ratings and their performance at the dispatch box. As we said, particularly recently, Keir Starmer does seem to have grown in that performance weekly on a Wednesday. Interesting new ratings out from YouGov on the party leaders' standings.
Yeah.
Rishi Sunak's pretty terrible, down at minus 49 now. That's the net favourability ratings from YouGov, and that makes him pretty much as unpopular as Boris Johnson was right at the end of his premiership. But it has to be said that Keir Starmer's approval ratings, well, for a party that's ahead in the polls, they are not great either. His ratings have also dropped over the year, and Keir Starmer's net approval rating is now minus 22. So that, I think, will disappoint many people in the Labour Party, although the party's general poll rating, as we said, is pretty decent.
Yeah. The backdrop to all of this, though, actually, for both the political parties, is the economic situation that we are in. We mentioned the GDP data out this morning. And so joining us in the studio to discuss is our senior UK economist, Dan Hanson. As bad as this line is, so the UK economy shrinking 3 times more than expected, that would be one way of putting it. It's only 1 month of data, and we're talking about tenths of percentage points here. But how bad was this October reading of UK GDP, that 1 month?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was worse than everyone was expecting. It was worse than we were expecting. But you're right that this is what we're talking about here is the difference between stagnation, mild contraction. We're not talking about a world where, thinking about the financial crisis, thinking about the 90s recession, the 80s recession. Obviously, we can't talk about the pandemic because that was enormous and unprecedented and very, very different, of course. But these are this line between, and this is a line I've peddled for a long time, but this line between contraction and stagnation is going to be a fine one, and it remains a fine one. It has been a fine one for the past 18 months. It's probably going to be the same for the next 9 months. But I think, it was worse than expected. And of course, in the context of you talking about Rishi Sunak, his priorities or his pledges, it looks like the fourth quarter, there'll probably be a contraction. And I think everyone's understanding is that the goal to grow the economy was to get quarterly growth in the final quarter of the year, and it looks like it's based on this data it's going to be a tough ask.
Yeah, so far it looks like it's not happening. Just dig into the numbers a little bit for us, Dan. Why was October so bad? I'm slightly obsessed by the weather. The weather was a factor though, wasn't it?
And it always is. We always either have rain, hot weather, cold weather, and that seems to always affect the GDP numbers. I mean, in this case it was rain. But I think when I looked at the breakdown, yes, there were obviously signs that the rain had affected things, particularly on the consumer side. But actually, it looks quite broad-based. Manufacturing, a lot of professional services took a hit, information and communication. And the sectors that did grow, they're not sort of areas where you'd expect it to be a source of sustained growth in the future, so health and things like that. So I think, there were signs, you're right, that there are these one-offs in there, and obviously the strikes are continuing to bump the numbers around. But I think I looked at the numbers, I looked at the release, and my first take was, broad-based weakness.
Wow, yeah, which is not good. What does it mean for the Bank of England? So we've got also, last PMQs, also the last Bank of England rate decisions coming up this week. Globally, the discussion is about major central banks around the world preparing to cut interest rates as we go into next year. What's the picture for the Bank of England? I mean, remember, 1.4 million people are going to be remortgaging next year. So a lot of people affected by that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And for the Bank of England, I mean, just thinking about Thursday and tomorrow, I don't think it means a huge amount, to be honest with you. You might get a slightly different vote split. You might get fewer voting for a hike now. I don't think you're going to get anyone voting for a cut just yet. And I think they're still going to be pretty firm on their guidance that policy needs to be restricted for an extended period of time. The words to that effect, at least. Looking further ahead, though, I think there is a question now. Like, markets are really ramping up their expectations for the bank. I don't think the bank will be willing to push back on that, just because...
Really?
No, I mean, I think, look, they're going to have the same guidance that they had in November, which I think they feel will do the job, but they won't want to explicitly pass comment on the path of market expectations. They do that very rarely, and there's quite a high bar for them to do it, because obviously it's very easy to be proved wrong. As you know, I mean, the last time they did it, just to give you the context, in November 2022, they pushed back on market expectations quite strongly, because that was around everything that happened with the Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng mini budget. Yeah. Rates then were 3%. They pushed back on an expectation that they would rise to 5.2%, and we're at 5.25% now. So
that's where we are now. Yeah.
So you do that, you do the same thing again, and 6 months down the line, you find you're having to cut interest rates, and the markets were right. So I just don't think it's worth expending that sort of capital saying something, because no one really knows. Of course they don't. It's so uncertain, and it's not that the bank have a better crystal ball than the rest of us. So I think they will just toe the party line, but they certainly won't do anything to encourage markets to think that rate cuts are coming. They'll toe the party line.
Talking which, we do a lot of looking on our Bloomberg terminals at market expectations for next year. Just talk us through in broad terms where the market thinks interest rates are heading, when there'll be a cut, and how much they might cut by over the course of the year, broadly. Yeah, so broadly speaking, for the Bank of England at least, you've got 100 basis points, which is getting close to what... So that's 1%. 1%, yeah. So we go from 5.25 now to 4.25 by the end of the year, which is obviously a lot. And the first rate cut is currently being fully priced for June, but there's a pretty good decent probability of a cut in May. I mean, if this data flow continues, the bank is really going to be tested in terms of its resolve, because you're going to have a weak economy, still pretty sticky inflation. I don't think that story has changed, and they're really going to have to sort of choose which side of this balancing act to place their hat. And I think, there is a risk that the shift in the market expectations is sort of borne out in reality, and they do sort of go for a sort of spring rate cut. One thing I think that will stop them going much earlier than that is the March budget, where more likely than not we're going to get some tax cuts, and I think they want to see the extent of the fiscal easing before they make any decision.
As we go into year end, though, are there reasons to be optimistic? I mean, we can often be quite gloomy about the state of the UK economy, but then the Prime Minister was trying to push back, saying, look, we've delivered, a boost to the national living wage, we recruited nurses and police officers, improved schools, delivered tax cuts. Is there anything in the data or in the stance at the moment that proves that next year could be better than expected?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, absolutely. So, and the way you can look at the sort of data in two ways, can't you? You can always be like, oh, well, the economy contracted, and it contracted by a bit, but it's still contracted, and that's not very good. But if you compare that to the reality, or sort of what you would have expected if you were told 18 months ago or 2 years ago that the Bank of England was about to jack up interest rates by 500 basis points, most of us would have fallen off a chair and said there'd be a deep recession. And we just haven't had that. So the sort of upside, or the sort of better news story that's there, is that the economy has almost consistently outperformed expectations, and the hit from interest rates has been far, far less than anyone would have expected if you'd sort of been given this scenario and said, how will this play out over the next 2 years or so? So I think, and the other very important point for consumers is that there's real wage growth has returned, and that's a really positive thing. Nominal wages are growing faster than prices, and that is a really positive story, and that could be a reason why, again, the economy does hold up over the course of 2024.
I think we should end on that positive note then, shouldn't we? A little bit of cheer. Senior UK economist Dan Hanson joining us.
Well, that is it for us today. If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe and give it 5 stars so that other people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
This episode was produced by James Wilcock. Our audio engineer was Marufal Hussain. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Yuan Potts.
As for tomorrow, we'll be covering the Bank of England rate decision, so the podcast will be back on Friday. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg UK Politics. Listen weekdays at noon on DAB Digital Radio in London.